Have you ever found yourself thinking about those epic, tragic love stories, the kind that poets write about and history never forgets? But have you ever dared to wonder what happens when a love story so powerful, so all-consuming, decides to break the laws, not of man, but of God himself? What happens when that love defies the very fabric of creation? Tonight, we delve into a story that begins in the blinding light of heaven, with celestial beings who made a choice that would unleash a darkness the world had never known. They were the Watchers, the angels who stood in the presence of the Almighty, but they turned their backs on that divine light, not for power, not for rebellion in the way we often hear, but for a feeling, an intoxicating, uncontrollable adoration for the daughters of man, for mortal women. And from that single forbidden gaze, a chain of events was set in motion so catastrophic it would require the world itself to be washed clean. What truly happened when those angels, beings of pure spirit, took human wives? Why was their love so monstrous that it turned these women into creatures of nightmare, their siren songs echoing through the abyss for eternity? And what of their children, the Nephilim, giants of myth and legend born from this unholy union whose very footsteps caused the earth to tremble? And most terrifying of all, what specific, agonizing punishment was reserved for the women at the heart of it all, as the world they knew was drowned and remade forever? Get ready, because the tale we are about to unravel on our channel is more than just a forgotten chapter from ancient texts. It is a timeless, chilling warning about boundaries that must never be crossed, and the catastrophic price of a love that was never meant to be. This right here is perhaps the single greatest story of love at first sight, gone horribly, apocalyptically wrong. Before we descend into this maelstrom of passion and punishment, do me a quick favor. Look around you. Where are you right now, and what time is it on the clock? Drop a comment below and let us know. It's incredible to think about how our community spans the entire globe, all of us connected in this one moment, ready to explore the same mystery together. Let me know where you're listening from. All right, let's begin. Picture the scene. A reality beyond our own. Heaven, not as a place of fluffy clouds and harps, but as a dimension of perfect, unending celestial order. Here, legions of angelic beings perform their sacred duties. Their voices join in a cosmic symphony of praise for the Creator, their power maintaining the very spin of galaxies, the birth of stars, the delicate dance of the cosmos. They have a single, unwavering purpose: to serve and to witness the glory of God. It is a life of serene, eternal devotion. Simple, isn't it? But then something happens. Something utterly unforeseen, a crack in the flawless diamond of existence. Some of these celestial beings, known as the Watchers, were tasked with observing humanity. From their celestial vantage point, these powerful angels gazed down upon the fledgling world of Earth, and they saw something that stopped the cosmic symphony in their souls. They saw the daughters of men, and these were not just any women. In a realm of perfect ethereal beings, the angels witnessed a different kind of beauty. A beauty that was messy, fragile, and breathtakingly real. It was in the way they laughed, their joy unburdened by the weight of eternity. It was in the way they cared for their families, their love, fierce and protective. It was in their mortality itself. The fleeting, precious nature of their lives gave every moment a depth and a passion that the immortal angels could never know. It was a raw, earthen beauty that nothing in the sterile perfection of heaven could possibly replicate. And this is precisely where our story takes a dark and fascinating turn. These angels, beings designed to be above such terrestrial desires, began to feel something stir within them. A profound magnetic pull they couldn't rationalize. It started as a flicker of curiosity, a fleeting thought. But with every glance downward, the feeling intensified, growing from a spark into a consuming fire. The divine light that radiated from them began to subtly dim, clouded by thoughts they knew they should not entertain. The temptation was no longer just a thought, It was becoming an obsession. Meanwhile, on Earth, life continued in its beautiful, chaotic rhythm. The women went about their days, working the land, sharing stories, falling in love, completely unaware that from the heavens above, beings of immense power were breaking the most sacred of cosmic laws, just to watch them. But a strange energy began to permeate the air. These women started to feel different. They felt a sense of being watched, not in a menacing way, but in a way that made them feel uniquely special, as if they were standing on the precipice of something magnificent and world-altering. You know that feeling? The electric stillness in the air right before a massive thunderstorm breaks? It was like that. A palpable humming energy that was an equal mix of thrilling anticipation and a deep instinctual sense of danger. It was as if the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for a celestial shoe to drop. The angels knew they were playing with fire, a primordial, divine fire. Each time they contemplated leaving their post, the weight of their sacred duty, their allegiance to God, their role as celestial guardians, crashed down upon them. But the pull, this new intoxicating emotion, grew stronger with every passing moment. They began to ask themselves questions that had never before entered their celestial consciousness. What would it be like to feel what humans feel? What would it be like to love, not with the abstract universal love for the Creator, but with a focused, passionate, all-consuming love for another being? Their hearts, forged to be vessels of divine love alone, were now overflowing with desires they could neither understand nor control. Day by day, more of the watchers joined the silent, obsessed vigil, their gazes locked on the world below. And with each passing day, their divine resolve weakened. The choice was tearing them apart from the inside. Uphold their eternal purpose or surrender to this magnificent, terrifying new emotion. Everything was about to change. Heaven and earth, two realms meant to be separate, were about to collide in the most intimate and disastrous way imaginable. And these angels, beings who had stood at the throne of God and witnessed the very birth of stars, were now willing to risk eternal damnation for a chance to experience human love. None of them could have possibly comprehended that this single collective choice would unleash a chain of events that would not only shake heaven to its foundations, but would scar the face of the earth forever. They came down, not as blinding beings of light that would terrify, but in forms that were divinely, irresistibly beautiful. When they walked among humanity, they seemed like kings, like gods among men. But if you were to look closer, past the radiant smiles and the captivating eyes, you would sense that something was profoundly wrong. Their smiles held secrets darker than a starless night. Their eyes, though mesmerizing, held a depth and an ancient knowledge that was unsettling, an agelessness that no mortal could ever possess. And the women who met them, they were drawn in like moths to a divine flame. And really, how could they resist? It was a celestial setup, an unfair advantage. How does a mortal woman say no to a being who seems to shine with an inner, otherworldly light? A being who seems to know the deepest secrets of her heart before she even speaks a word. A being who could promise her knowledge of the heavens, of creation itself, things no earthly man could ever hope to offer. But here is where the true horror begins to creep in. The more time these women spent in the company of their fallen angel lovers, the more they began to change. It was as if they were catching a reflection of that otherworldly light, and it was altering them from the inside out. Their perspective on the world shifted. Ordinary life, with its simple joys and struggles, suddenly felt bland and insufficient. The mortal men of their villages, once the objects of their affection and admiration, now seemed dull, weak, and utterly boring in comparison to these celestial paramours. The fallen angels knew exactly what they were doing. They were strategic. They sought out the very women they had obsessed over from above, the ones whose beauty and spirit had first captured their immortal hearts. They used their celestial powers to appear as the perfect embodiment of everything these women had ever dreamed of in a partner. It was the ultimate fairy tale romance, but it was a fairy tale with a hidden, horrifying twist. Every time one of these angels took a human wife, it didn't just create a marriage. It created a tear in the fabric of reality. These unions sent ripples of discord not only through human society, but through the highest realms of heaven. These were alliances that were never meant to be, a fusion of spirit and flesh that broke a fundamental law of creation. And the children born of these forbidden unions, this is where our story plunges into an even deeper, more terrifying darkness. These children were the Nephilim. Imagine a baby being born, but instead of remaining small and vulnerable, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. These were not normal children. They were born as giants, possessing a terrifying combination of their father's angelic power and their mother's human passions, but with none of the divine wisdom required to control either. They were beings of immense strength and insatiable appetites. Imagine a toddler's temper tantrum, but the toddler is the size of a building and can level a forest in its rage. That was the reality of the Nephilim. When a Nephilim walked, the very ground shook. When they spoke, their voices boomed like thunder. Cities and villages lived in a constant state of terror. What could a normal human do against a being that could move mountains and whose hunger could empty an entire village's food supply in a single day? The Nephilim took what they wanted, ate what they wanted, and destroyed anything and anyone that stood in their path. Some were as tall as the mightiest cedars. Others were rumored to be even larger, and they weren't just behemoths of brute force. They carried a spark of their father's celestial intelligence, which made them cunning and all the more dangerous. Meanwhile, in heaven, God was watching all of this unfold. The perfect, orderly world he had created was being thrown into chaos, terrorized by these hybrid abominations, creatures that were never supposed to exist. His divine patience wore thin as he saw the fear and suffering these giants inflicted upon his beloved human creation. The very people he had made in his image were now living as prey, hiding in caves, their prayers turning from praise to desperate pleas for salvation. That is when the greatest warriors of heaven, the archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, knew they had to intervene. But even for these paragons of divine might, confronting the Nephilim was no simple task. Fighting a Nephilim wasn't like fighting a simple demon, it was like fighting a force of nature. They were a grotesque fusion of holy and profane, making them incredibly resilient, almost impossible to destroy by conventional celestial means. And there were so many of them. The archangels gathered their loyal armies, meticulously planning their strategy. They couldn't just charge in, because these were not simply creatures of darkness. They were, in a horrifying way, their kin. They were the children of their fallen brothers. To strike them down was to strike down a twisted reflection of themselves. But this is the incredible thing about having God on your side. You have backup plans on a cosmic scale. When the archangels realized that even their combined might would not be enough to quell the Nephilim infestation without utterly destroying the earth in the process, God himself decided on a final terrible solution. He devised a plan that would change the world forever, a plan of purification, a great flood that would wash away every trace of the corruption that had spread across the face of the earth. The battle that followed was unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. The armies of heaven descended, not just to fight the Nephilim, but to herald the coming cataclysm. As the archangels engaged the giants on the fields and mountains, the sky began to change. Lightning, unlike any storm ever seen, tore across the heavens. Thunder didn't just roll, it cracked the sky open, and then the rain began to fall. For the very first time in their arrogant, powerful lives, the Nephilim felt something they had never experienced before, a cold, creeping sensation that their immense strength could not overcome. It was fear, true, primal fear. It was about to become devastatingly clear to everyone. fallen angel, human and Nephilim alike, that there are some lines you simply do not cross. Think of the worst storm you have ever seen. Now multiply its intensity by 1,000,000. That is what began on the day God decided that enough was enough. The sky didn't just darken, it turned an abyssal, suffocating black. The air grew thick and heavy, so dense it felt hard to draw a breath. At first, people might have dismissed it. It's just rain, right? But this was different. The drops were not gentle. They were heavy, like liquid bullets, hammering the earth with relentless fury. They were like the tears of heaven itself, each one a drop of sorrow and wrath. Hour after hour, day after day, the downpour was ceaseless. There was no reprieve, no lessening, just a solid wall of water descending from an enraged sky. The mighty Nephilim, the same beings who had terrorized the world, were the first to truly panic. These giants, who could shatter boulders with their bare hands, were now rendered helpless against the rising tide. They scrambled for high ground, climbing the tallest mountains, their brute strength now meaningless against the inexorable power of a planet turning against them. Nature itself had rejected them. The air was filled with a cacophony of screams, the desperate cries of humans and giants alike, begging for a mercy that would not come. The fallen angels, now bound and powerless, could only watch in horror as their magnificent, terrible children thrashed and struggled against the deluge. But there was nothing they could do. This was God's judgment, and no power in heaven or on earth could stop it. And amidst this churning, world-ending chaos, a single vessel floated in safety, Noah's Ark. Imagine being on that ship, hearing the storm howl outside like a cosmic beast, feeling the colossal waves lift and slam your vessel as if it were a child's toy. Inside were the last remnants of the old world, the only humans and animals chosen to survive the great global purge. They could hear the muffled, desperate screams from the world outside, the cries of those being consumed by the water, but they could do nothing. This was God's plan, and their survival depended on their faith in it. The water rose higher and higher still. First, it swallowed the plains, then the forests, then the hills. Finally, even the highest mountain peaks, where the last of the Nephilim had made their final stand, disappeared beneath the endless, turbulent waves. The Nephilim, the seemingly unstoppable giants, were now just more debris in the churning water. Their extraordinary strength could not save them from the suffocating depths. Their reign was over. From their newly forged prisons in the abyss, the fallen angels watched it all. They witnessed everything they had built, everyone they had loved, be systematically erased from existence. Their perfect, powerful children, their beautiful human wives, the cities they had helped erect, all gone. The world they had so selfishly corrupted was now being violently cleansed. For 40 days and 40 nights, the waters fell, and when the rain finally ceased, the world was a silent, unbroken ocean. No mountains, no valleys, no cities, just water stretching from one horizon to the other. The only sign of life was Noah's Ark, a tiny speck adrift on an endless sea. And as the waters slowly began to recede, they revealed a world scrubbed clean, remade. Everything the Nephilim had built, every trace of their existence, was gone. It was as if a cosmic reset button had been pressed on planet Earth. But for some, particularly the women who had lain with angels, you might think the worst was over. You would be wrong. For them, a punishment far more intimate and eternal was just beginning. Remember the women who had fallen in love with the Watchers? Some of them had survived the initial flood, but this survival was not a blessing. It was a curse. Imagine loving someone with every fiber of your being, a perfect, powerful, celestial being, only to watch them be dragged away in ethereal chains, condemned to an eternity of darkness. That was the fate of these women. Their once mighty angel husbands were now imprisoned in the deepest, darkest corners of creation. Some were bound in lightless valleys, others trapped in spiritual prisons of eternal torment, unable to ever help, protect, or even hold their wives again. The women were left utterly alone, forced to confront the apocalyptic consequences of their choices. The psychic weight was unbearable. Some simply broke under the strain, their minds shattering from the realization that their love had helped bring about the end of the world. It was a guilt too heavy for any mortal soul to bear. They knelt on the newly cleansed earth, crying until no tears were left, begging a silent heaven for a forgiveness they would never receive. But not all of them felt remorse. Take the figure of Nema, beautiful, proud, and unrepentant. Even after witnessing the destruction of the world, she refused to bow. She had become drunk on her own power and beauty, using her allure to lead others astray, just as she had been led. And even now she stood defiant, her pride becoming its own inescapable prison. And this is where God's judgment became both poetic and cruel. For their part in this cosmic transgression, these women were transformed. They were cursed to become the sirens of the deep, the original mermaids of myth, creatures whose breathtaking beauty and enchanting voices would be used to lure sailors to their watery graves. Think about the terrible irony. Just as they were seduced by a beauty from another realm, their own beauty was twisted into a deadly, eternal trap. They became beautiful but lethal, forever echoing the very nature of the temptation they fell for, luring others to the same doom they were drawn into. The psychological impact was absolute. These women were condemned to live with the crushing knowledge of their role in the world's destruction. Some were driven mad by grief, while others became little more than hollow, soulless shells, their spirits broken by the sheer weight of what they had done. And the most exquisite form of torture, their angel husbands locked away in their chains of darkness could feel it all. Through some lingering, cursed connection, they could feel their wives' pain, their despair, their slow descent into monstrous madness. They could hear their mournful, deadly songs across the ages, a constant, agonizing reminder of the love they chose and the price everyone paid. They were forced to experience their wives' eternal torment, completely and utterly powerless to stop it. After the flood, the world was new, but it was a world under watch. The loyal angels were given a new, solemn duty to stand sentinel over this changed planet and ensure that nothing like this could ever happen again. From their posts, they watched the sea monsters, the women who might have been their sisters-in-law, sing their fatal lullabies. They watched humanity slowly rebuild, trying to forget the terror of the flood. It was a new chapter for everyone, a world cleansed by water, but the scars ran deep. The loyal angels now kept their distance. They watched, but they did not interfere. They had learned the ultimate lesson. There are boundaries, divine lines in the sand that must never ever be crossed, no matter how tempting the reason. But even this incredible saga is not the end of the story. There is another, a confrontation so profound it was kept hidden for millennia, a battle between the two most powerful archangels to ever exist. Michael, the commander of God's armies, and Lucifer, the morning star, the prince of darkness. And what were they fighting over? The body of Moses. Yes, you heard that right. Moses, the lawgiver, the man who parted the Red Sea. Why would the devil himself want the corpse of a prophet so desperately? And what made Michael so furiously protective that he would directly confront his fallen brother in a clash that would echo through the heavens? The reasons are shocking, and they change everything you think you know about the eternal conflict between good and evil. Ultimately, the story of the fallen angels and their human wives serves as a stark and visceral reminder. The allure of the forbidden, the temptation to cross the lines drawn by God, can lead to choices with consequences so vast they are impossible to foresee. Those mighty beings who once basked in the light of heaven are now bound by an eternal, unchangeable punishment. And this warning isn't just for them, it is for all of us. It speaks to the part of the human heart that is drawn to the dangerous, to the things we know we shouldn't want. It reminds us of the profound value of loyalty, of humility, and of respecting the natural and divine order of things. We are not just passive listeners to this ancient story. We are active participants in our own, making choices every single day that define our path. Can we learn from their catastrophic mistakes to avoid repeating them in our own lives? Can we find the wisdom to walk the path laid out for us, understanding that sometimes a single misstep, driven by the most powerful of emotions, can change our destiny forever? The answers to those questions lie deep within the stories that have shaped our world. Stories of light, of darkness, and of the perilous gray in between. If you believe that every myth holds a kernel of truth, and you feel compelled to continue this journey with us, to uncover more of these lost chapters and forgotten warnings, then make the choice to be part of our community. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we continue to explore the mysteries that lie just beneath the surface of what we think we know.